Hello YouTube friends and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Deidre from Our Upcycled Life and I do lots of thrifting, upcycling, repurposing, and DIY content, and I love new crafting friends. So make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notification so you don't miss any great content. I also have a weekly newsletter that I put out that has free graphics in it every week. If you're interested in signing up for that, I'll put the link down below in the description and you can head over there, sign up with your email, and I'll send you free graphics and lots of updates on what I have going on behind the scenes. Today I have a whole video full of my favorite thrift store makeovers. I have so many of them from this past year, but this is just a few of them that I put together that I wanted to share with you again, and maybe some of these will inspire you to create some of these for yourself. Lots of content, so let's get started. First project that I'm going to do are these thrifted wooden candlesticks. I always find them when I'm out and about. I think these were 50 cents a piece, so a really great deal. But I'm going to bleach them and turn them into more of a lighter color. These are really reddish, and by doing this bleaching technique, they can turn out a lot more modern looking. I'm just taking an 80 grit sanding block and sanding paper, and I'm just giving them a really rough sand. You can see right here what it looks like after I've given the one candlestick a really good sanding. I'm going to take these out to my shed. I've just cut open a cardboard box and I have straight bleach in my spray bottle. After I've sanded down these candlesticks, you want to spray them with the bleach all over quite a bit. You want to saturate it, walk away, let it dry completely. And if it's a sunny day out, you can even set it outside in the sun and let it dry quicker. And I had to spray them I think actually 3 times to get this really fantastic bleached color on them, and I just love the way that they turned out. After I got them both bleached, I took my polyacrylic sealer and I gave them a really good coat to seal them up. Make sure if you do this technique, you do it in a really well ventilated area, but it's taken those dated reddish kind of tinted stained candlesticks and gave them a really nice modern feel. I love them. Simple, easy DIY. Second project, I mixed up some of my homemade sand paint. I'll put the link down below in the description. If you've never tried this paint, you need to try it out. I got a vase that I picked up at the thrift store, was really ugly, kind of white and black, looked like somebody had tried to upcycle it before, but I'm going to paint it with my sand paint. This sand paint recipe will take your ceramic or your glass jars to the next level. It gives it a really kind of stoned, aged look and much better than the way it was before. It takes a couple coats. I put 3 coats on this vase, let it really dry completely in between each coat, and when it was finished, fabulous. So if you see those old vases at the thrift store, grab them and give this painting technique a try. Third project, I'm upcycling this lamp. Picked it up, really cheap at a thrift store. The bones were really good on it. I really liked the lampshade. It needed a little bit of an embellishment fringe on it. So I had some macrame cord and I measured out the macrame cord so I could make a nice tassel fringe along the bottom of the lamp. I have the full tutorial with all the measurements and everything on how I made this lampshade. I'll put the link down below in the description, and if you're interested in trying to make a fringe like this, you can go and you can watch that one. This just took a couple easy macrame knots and a little bit of patience, but it was so worth it. I think after this lamp was done, if you were to go to a store and buy a lamp like this, it would definitely cost you a lot of money. I think I took this thrift store find and turned it into a really high-end looking lamp. You can buy the macrame cord on Amazon, and every thrift store always has lamps to choose from. Just pick out something that catches your eye and recreate it. For the base of the lamp, I mixed up some white sand paint, and I think it complemented that brown rattan shade with the macrame fringe. And when it was all dry, I gave it a really good coat of my polyacrylic sealer, and I love it. Next project was this wooden shelf, and the heart on the back really dated it. So I took the heart off and I wanted to put just a plain piece of wood on the backing to replace where that heart was. Just took a couple finishing nails and tacked it in place, and it held it firmly, and now it is not dated at all. I took some of my homemade stain as the first coat, and then I dabbed on some Vaseline. I'm going to try to make a real kind of farmhouse feel shelf with this. Lots of rustic chippy paint happening. After everything was dry, I went over it with my homemade white chalk paint, gave it a really good coat, and when that was all finished, then I took it outside and I gave it a really good sanding to make it nice and rustic and chippy. And I'm going to do my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer on this. These graphics I've designed myself, and I'm going to put them right on that piece of wood that I put on where that heart was. I think it looks fantastic. I let it dry for about 24 hours and then I rubbed the paper off. This is the end result. And if you like any of these graphics that I've made, I'll put the links down below. They're in my Etsy store and you can grab them for yourself. Now that heart that I took out of the middle of that shelf, let's upcycle it. I really banged it up with a hammer, made it really rustic, added on some candle wax, started layering my paint. Put on a brown paint, some more candle wax, and then a nice blue turquoise color, and then candle wax. And then my last coat, I put on some of my white chalk paint. And when you sand it, everywhere where there was that wax, it's going to chip off and leave those colors from underneath. Again, I'm doing my Mod Podge reverse graphic. I printed off the graphics, let them dry for 24 hours, rubbed off the paper. And how cute is this? We now have a heart that's not dated. Sixth project is this tool painted key holder. It had a few knots that were leaching through the wood and the paint, so I sanded it all down, and then I wanted to seal it with some primer, otherwise those knots would just keep coming through. Once the primer was dry, I took my white chalk paint, gave it a coat of paint, took it outside and gave it a sanding, and then I'm going to do my Mod Podge reverse graphics, and I just printed off the word keys. I thought that was nice and simple and would work great for this little key rack. Put on the Mod Podge and then pressed all the bubbles and wrinkles out, set it aside for 24 hours, and then the next day I came back and I rubbed off the paper, and here's the end result. Next project is a glass plate that I picked up at the thrift store. I think it might have been 50 cents, 75 cents, but I wanted to paint it white. And if you really want your paint to stick, put a coat of primer on first. I let the primer dry really well, and then I put a couple coats of my homemade chalk paint on it. After everything had really dried, I put on my Mod Podge graphics, and make sure if you like any of these, you can grab them in my Etsy store, 50% off if you use the code SAVE50. This is completely dry. I wanted to leave the back just glass, and I dampened my graphics, rubbed off the paper, and it turned out beautiful. I sealed it all up with some polyacrylic sealer, and it's ready to display in my house. Eighth project is this cutting board. Looks like it's straight out of the 90s, really dated. I wanted to give it kind of a farmhouse feel, so I gave it a spray paint of matte white, and then when that was dry, I painted it with my homemade white chalk paint. I designed these graphics, measure, stir, bake, thought it was perfect for this cutting board, printed it off on my LaserJet printer, sized it so it would fit right onto that cutting board, used my Mod Podge mat, and then put it on the cutting board, let it sit for 24 hours, and then I rubbed the paper off, and we were left with a fantastic graphic on that cutting board that looks perfect in my kitchen. This isn't to use, it's just for decor, but I sealed it up with some polyacrylic sealer and looks great. Ninth project is this really ornate metal tray. I just fell in love with it as soon as I saw it. I want to give it a really kind of chippy painted look, so I'm taking my candle wax, put it all over that little metal tray, and then I painted it with some gold acrylic paint. When all that gold acrylic paint was dry, I put some more candle wax on, and then I went over it with my homemade white chalk paint. Now, a little trick that I love doing to make everything look just a little bit more old and a little bit more vintage is to do a rust technique. If you grab your sanding block, just sand down some of the high edges on this. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab some cinnamon and a little bit of Mod Podge. Put that Mod Podge in the areas where you think it would rust or where it would wear through. Just dab it on here and there. And then you take your cinnamon and you sprinkle it into that Mod Podge. When the Mod Podge dries, you wipe off that extra cinnamon and it's going to look like it's rusty and old and fantastic. You set it aside, and when the Mod Podge is all dry, I like just to take a paintbrush and just brush away all of that extra cinnamon that didn't have any Mod Podge on it, and you're just left with what looks like a rusty old tray that just takes it to that next level. I'm going to put a cute little quote on this tray, smile, sparkle, shine. I put a lot of quotes on a lot of the stuff that I upcycle. They sell really well than if I just leave it without anything. So if you say to yourself, oh geez, she puts words on everything, the reason I do is because they do resell a lot better. I sealed everything up with some polyacrylic sealer and it's all finished. 10th project is this Kleenex holder. It's ceramic. I knew I could make it pretty and farmhouse. I sprayed it all down with some primer and then I took my matte spray paint after that had all dried and gave it a really good spray with that. I am making my own homemade napkins to do this method. Really easy. I'll put a link down below if you want to make your own custom napkins. Basically, you're going to custom make your own napkin and then decoupage it onto your project. I've put this down on a plastic sleeve. I'm just going to kind of make the edges kind of ragged so it blends in better when you put it on your project. And then I'm going to put some Mod Podge on the Kleenex box, add the graphic, and then seal it all up with some polyacrylic sealer. Bless you! Isn't it cute? 11th project was this little glass plate. I actually think I found out afterwards that it might have been off of a butter dish. I spray painted it with some matte black spray paint. When that was dry, I went over it with some white chalk paint. I always like to layer my colors, so if I sand it down, the black will peek through. And then I put on a second coat, and then I took the edge of my scissors and I just scraped off those couple top layers of that white chalk paint so the black would peek through, and it gave it a really chippy rustic look. I sized up and printed off on my LaserJet printer the word sparkle. I thought this would make a really cute little trinket dish. Used my Mod Podge mat to apply it onto the dish. I let it sit for 24 hours, then rubbed off the paper, and the graphics were left on that cute little dish. I thought it would be perfect for earrings or necklace to put in the bedroom. I always find these little pieces of glassware really cheap too. So if you just use your imagination and you just can kind of create some little pieces with it, they're so original and they're so beautiful. I left the back just plain glass and then I sealed it all up with some polyacrylic sealer, and I just love the way that it turned out. 12th project is this little ceramic container that had milk on it. I didn't really care for the colors of it, took it outside, gave it a spray paint of my matte black, and then when that was all dry, I gave it a coat of my homemade chalk paint. It took 2 coats of the homemade chalk paint, and the milk was raised on this little container, and I wanted it to kind of stand out. So after all of the chalk paint had dried, I'd sponged on a little bit to give it a little bit of texture. I took some black acrylic paint on the sponge and just dabbed it over that raised milk. I thought that was easier than trying to hand paint exactly where those letters were, and then afterwards I just took the paintbrush in and just kind of cleaned up around the edges where the black had kind of spilled onto that white paint. It worked really well. I took my sanding block and I roughed up all around the edges to make that black paint peek through, and I thought it made it look vintage and old. I wanted to make a little hang tag for it. I printed off a picture of a cow and I went around the edges of the tag with a black marker so it looked a little bit aged. Added some twine and some embellishments, put it on the top of that little container, and I think it looked fantastic. Oh, I also added a few beads that I painted, and so cute and so easy to do to add to your farmhouse decor. 13th project is a wooden napkin holder, but I'm not going to use it as a napkin holder. I am going to make it into a place to keep my mail at my front door. I gave it a really good coat of my homemade white chalk paint. And then I designed a graphic that said mail. I thought that would be perfect for the front of it. I used my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method, stuck it on the front of that napkin holder, let it dry, and then I rubbed all the paper off, gave it a really good sanding so it was nice and rustic and chippy, and perfect spot to keep mail at the front door. That's pretty. 14th project is a rolling pin. I never pass them up if I find them because they can be upcycled into such cute kitchen decor. I sprayed it with some matte black chalk paint, and then I did the white roller part in white chalk paint, and then I made the graphic bake. It looked really cute on this rolling pin. Used my Mod Podge and put the Mod Podge on, let it sit for 24 hours. Then I wet it down, rubbed off the graphic, added a really cute little ribbon to it that finished it off perfect. And these actually sell really well too. So if you see them, grab them if you're a reseller. And here's another way that I had another rolling pin that I upcycled. I painted the handles with some red acrylic paint. I like to use a nice bright color that you would find in a farmhouse kitchen. Let them dry really well. And I had this wrapping paper that had vintage advertising on it. I'm just going to decoupage it onto the middle of that rolling pin. I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat and just put a liberal coat over the rolling pin part. But when you want your paper to be a little bit more pliable when you're going to decoupage with it, I just like to spray it with a little bit of water. It just helps it lay flat and decoupage nicer. I just do it in little sections, doing a little bit underneath and then a little bit on top. And when it's all done, I'll set it aside, I'll let it dry. And that's all there is to this project. And like I said before, these little rolling pins sell really well if you're a reseller. 15th project, and probably my favorite. I've jam-packed a lot in here, so hopefully you're still all following along because there's some really great ideas for inspiration. This was really dated, Scream 90s with that heart in it, but I knew I could work around it and make it into something with a lot of farmhouse charm. I spray painted it with some matte black spray paint, and then I just took my candle wax and I went crazy. I put candle wax all over it everywhere, and then I just started to layer up my paint. I'm just using some acrylic paint that I had left over. Acrylic paint, and then candle wax, and then acrylic paint, and then candle wax, and I layered up a whole bunch of different colors, letting them completely dry in between each coat. White is going to be my top coat. I'm going to let it completely dry, and then I took my scraper and I scraped off and I sanded off anywhere where there was wax. That paint color that was underneath is going to pick through. I picked out one of my favorite farmhouse graphics that I have out of my Etsy store. That's what I'm going to put on the top of this stool. Use my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer. Get it all even exactly where I wanted on that stool. Left it. And then the next day I came back, I rubbed off all of the paper, and then I sealed it up really well with some polyacrylic sealer. Full of chippy, layered paint, and I love it. Well, that's a wrap up of some of my favorite thrift store makeovers from this past year. I had a lot of fun creating them, and I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to know down in the comments which one was your favorite. And also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. Sign up with your email, and you'll get free graphics every week that you can create some of these projects yourself with those graphics. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.